It's the political free agents. We are back for our Tuesday episode. What's crackalacking, people? Another slow news week. Nothing to talk about. We just sit here and shoot the breeze. I just sit back and just do nothing. Nothing else to really do right now. The news cycle is always crazy, and I get on here every week, and I got into the habit of saying, there's a lot going on, sort of thing. And I was like, wait a minute. I say that every single week. And this week is absolutely no exception to that rule. This week is really, seriously kind of crazy. We have so many things going on between impeachment, no fly list, uh, people losing jobs because of the Capitol, their involvement at the Capitol. All these things are going on actively right now, and to top it off, we have the impeachment and the 25th Amendment trying to be invoked, and like it's crazy. To see, I was actually wondering how, not necessarily just Trump, but how the right would, as a whole, would like try to spin this, and it went in a bit of an obvious direction. We're gonna go into it a little bit, but it went into an obvious direction. But it also went in one that I just did not see coming. I was like, okay, that's an interesting move there. But we're gonna dig into that. If you did not catch Sunday's episode, it was a little bit longer, but we had the whole crew was here, which is always awesome, and it was really fun to get back in and debate the fellas a little bit. I love having them on. It makes for a better show, in my opinion. I don't mind coming and talking to you, but I do enjoy speaking with the crew whenever they can join. So, the audio was a little bit off, and I forgot to pull up the chat here. So bear with me for a second. The audio was a little bit off on Mike because Mike was traveling, but you could still kind of catch what Mike was saying in that sense. So it still works. Um, it was still a good episode, and definitely a lot of good conversation coming out of that. All right, so before we get rolling into these topics, I actually wanted to, and ignore me kind of clicking around here again. I'm getting the chat going here so I can make sure I'm following when folks are on here chatting with us. So what we um, what we have been talking about before in previous the last 2 months or so, we've been really looking at what can you do to kind of prepare yourself to get beyond this moment, or these types of moments, right? Uh, I read an interesting article that was talking about the timelines of essentially what the country goes through, a violent period, right? And if you do the math and you take us back 50 years from 2020, which, yes, I know it's 2021, but, you know, 2020 was pretty violent in and of itself. So if you go back 50 years, that's 1970. And 1970, what do we have? We had violent uprisings, a bunch of riots and things like this over racial strife and wars and all this sort of stuff, right? You go back 50 years. We had racial strife, we had workers' strife, we had all these things that were creating these violent uprisings. Go back 50 years, Civil War, right? Go back more another 50. It's like as you go back these years, you start seeing, oh, it's about a 50-year cycle, and then everybody kind of loses their mind a little bit collectively, and we see violent uprisings. I just found it interesting. I'm big on math, and so markets tend to shift and change every 10 years, and just the collective humanity of the people in America seems to shift every 50, in terms of how we address or when we get to the boiling point to where things kind of tip over. So yeah, it's interesting. It's just something interesting to think about that every 50 years we end up uh, going through pretty much the same thing over and over and over. Right. So anyway, but we talk about the different things that we want to do here in terms of preparing ourselves. And we talk about finances a lot. And we didn't get to deal with that on Sunday because we were dealing with uh, basically the recap of everything that was going on at the Capitol. And so essentially, our start for this week is to just talk about crypto, one of our favorite topics. And what's been happening with crypto that people tend to be a little bit um, bothered with is that crypto tends to retrace a little bit, and it kind of makes people nervous like, oh no, here we go, right? Like we're about to go down, to zero, and I'm about to lose all of my money and all of that. I'm gonna pull up a chart here so we could take a look at it. But basically, Bitcoin was at 40, I believe it hit 42,000 total. And then it came back down to where it is now, which is, it looks like it's at 31. So let's go ahead and get this chart up real quick. Let's see if I have this thing set up and configured. There we go. Nice. All right, so let me actually hide all of these lines here. All right, so if you haven't read a chart before, there's a lot of, detail here. Things may seem a little bit new in terms of these candles. A lot of times you see like a bar chart where it's just kind of like lines or a line going up. But we kind of hit a bit of a high. Oh, this is the US 30. That's the Dow. Sorry. I knew something. I was like, I thought it was at 33. There we go. I was like, we must have dropped a little bit more. Okay, so now this is Bitcoin here. All right, so if I squeeze this down quite a bit here, we can see we basically hit a high right here of 41,000, roughly 450, something like that. And so this high, we basically went from there and we dropped down all the way down here, which was 23%. And that's a massive drop. And matter of fact, that was in 2 days and 21 hours. So almost 3 days, we ended up dropping that far. And probably is 3 days. I kind of missed on my box here. I missed the all-time high candle there. And so that's what you call volatility, right? Like 23% in 2 days to almost 3 days there. That's volatile. That's very volatile. And so you have to be careful when making any investment choice, but you have to be careful in understanding what that investment tends to do and how it can move. And so from that particular drop right here, we actually ended up seeing it go back up. So we went down to 31ish and we came back to 36 and then we dropped back down to 32 and now we're hovering around 33, right? So we're doing all of this like, back and forth, and now we're kind of in a little bit of what's called consolidation where we're just kind of going sideways. Remember, charts go up, down, and sideways. And so we're consolidating a little bit right now. But if let me say when, because we're bullish on Bitcoin. Let me squeeze this chart down a little bit so we can see a little more. We have a little bit of support coming from here. Well, actually, it's resistance now because we're below the 34,000 mark. If we can get above that and then break back above this level here at about 36, we should start seeing that come back up. So why am I going through this, right? Like this is chart reading type stuff. Why am I even dealing with chart reading on here? And mind you, I'm not an expert at chart reading. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing doing my paper trading, which is, basically just down here. You can see I have 3,400 bucks in here. Um, and it started at 2,500. So I've made about 900. Paper trading is just like fake trading. It just gives you a chance to work your strategy and try things and see if you can be effective in your trades. And so I'm using it to really learn this system. I'm working on tradingview.com right here. But a point for bringing it up is that when this dropped, and this is any market, mind you, I'm talking Bitcoin here. But when this dropped, what ended up happening was a buying opportunity, and this is mainly the focus of this segment here. Is I want you to, if you think, oh, my stock or my crypto or whatever is just plummeting, and I'm, let's just say you believe in it, you believe it's bullish and whatever that thing is. If it's just plummeting like this and you just see it falling, you could sell, of course. But if you sell, that's when you lose because you don't sell until you lose. And that the basic idea is that you still have your asset locked in at a certain price and you hold that asset. Okay, it's not worth as much, or now it's a negative worth, like it's less worth than, oh, excuse me, worth less than what you bought it for, but you still own that asset. So when we come back up and we get back up here to this level, like up here, and we cross back over that level, you're going to be at the position to where you still own an asset that was at a price that was below that, right? So it's called strong hands. You got to have a strong hands whenever you're in a space, especially a space that's as volatile as crypto is. So just keep your eye on that. There is a course that I took from Jason Stapleton. You can go to tradewithjason.com and take a look at it. If it fits for you, if you're interested in learning a lot more about how to read these charts, how to do things like, pinpoint these particular patterns, utilize Fibonacci and all these different tools to be able to better read these charts and not just like look at them and say, I feel great about this, right? Because that's when you become what's called dumb money. And dumb money is whenever you just are just throwing money into the pie and just at the market rate, you're just like, I want it, I want it, I want it. And you don't have any basis for whether or not it's actually going to be successful, right? Now, mind you, all of it's kind of a gamble, right? Like it's legal gambling, and I can get on a soapbox about, how the government doesn't want us gambling, but they'll let us gamble, right? If it fits the economy, quote unquote, right? We can gamble on stocks, ETFs, futures, options. We can do all these things because they've blessed those things. But you can't, put a old school penny machine in your driveway and have people come up and pay pennies to try to win their load, their lot. So it's all gambling. So you need to make sure that you're educated in that area. And I didn't intend this to be a trade with Jason advertisement. It wasn't intended for that, but it was useful, and I still go back to it. I did it last year, 2 years ago, and every now and then I'll just go back and I'll listen. Because there's just little things like as you get better at these things, it becomes clearer to you how these things operate, and it just makes more sense, and it's easier for you to navigate because it's like, oh, okay, I understand what they're saying now. I get that. That makes sense. So anyway, keep an eye on that. Check it out if you're interested. There's also a lot of other courses. You can also go on YouTube. There's a lot of people on YouTube if you don't want to pay for a course. There's a lot of people there that are talking about it. Just be careful. You'll learn what FOMO is, or as as my wife calls it, Fablo. FOMO is fear of missing out. My wife calls it fear of being left out. Oh my goodness. Somebody told her that at work, and that just cracks me up. I don't know why. That one's just so hilarious to me. All right. So, Sunday, we talked about what happened at the Capitol. So, I'm not going to rehash everything that happened at the Capitol. We have seen new video come out that is showing a lot of different things. And I'm not going to show video. We're going to look at an article here about some of the fallout that's happening, and then I'll pontificate a little bit about thoughts there. But I posted yesterday or so. I found it fascinating that the crowd that said Colin Kaepernick was disrespecting the flag by kneeling was the crowd that beat a cop with the flag at the Capitol. I mean, the hypocrisy, like the show started based on hypocrisy. The whole political free agents thing was about exposing hypocrisy, right? And sometimes it takes hypocrisy a little bit of a while to kind of show up. And that's fine, you know. But we've seen the hypocrisy just run rampant at this time. One of the things that I've noticed, besides beating a cop with an American flag, besides putting an American flag and draping it across a desk, and besides walking through the Capitol with the Confederate flag, which was a bunch of losers, and I have absolutely zero sympathy for any Confederate soldiers or their legacy. Um, the the thing that stands out to me in what's been happening over the weekend, in the last couple of days, is they're coming face to face with isms, right? Uh, Not necessarily just racism, but they're catching a little bit of the isms. And they're not sure how to respond to this. They're not sure how to handle this. And I say that because you can check on Twitter, hashtag no fly list. They're, the videos are kind of funny because they're making, of course, the internet's undefeated. So the internet's going to do what the internet's going to do with content. Uh, what's happening is people went to the Capitol. They, and I'm speaking specifically to the people who went in as a part of the like insurrection coup type parts, right? Not the ones that were just out there waving a Trump flag. Not those. I'm talking about the ones that were actually in there being violent, doing their thing. They they went to a place that is full of cameras, mind you, full of cameras. Many of them with nothing covering their face, nothing covering personal identifiers, tattoos, things like that. Nothing covering. And of course, video hits the internet because there's a bunch of people recording on their phones. Some of the people who are in there being violent are posting to Parler who got hacked, and now all that EXIF data, EXIF data, which is in any image that you post, it has your GPS location and other just general information about the photo. exposure, stuff like that. Had their GPS, had their visual person in the shot in some cases, showing them doing things they weren't supposed to be doing. And the FBI just was like, "Oh, hi Johnny. You're trying to fly home? We'll meet you at the terminal." And is kicking them off flights, taking them off flights, arresting them right there. Right? Like as as Mike has said this weekend or so, you play dumb games, you get dumb prizes. And so relating to the isms side of it is one of the guys said something to the effect of, because he was a Trump supporter, that they're trying to ruin their lives, right? Like the authorities are trying to ruin their lives. As if the authorities made them go there, as if the authorities made them get violent. Uh, you know, it's fascinating, because at the beginning of this entire presidency, mind you, this has been a 4-year buildup. People think, I'm debating one of my uncles a lot, who I love, very smart, intelligent man. I look up to him a lot. But I'm debating him a lot about this insurrection type stuff. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that people aren't looking at the buildup, right? They're looking at it and they're saying, I didn't see him incite an insurrection. Well, what do you think he's been doing for these 4 years? He's been gaslighting all of these people for 4 years, telling them that they're victims, they're marginalized, the country's against them, the radical left, they're going to do this. So you've been telling them that they're basically, quote unquote, mentally at war for 4 years. Like it's not like we just arrived here and we're having to research, like FDR policies or something. Like we weren't around, and so we don't know the intricacies because we weren't 40 when, like I'm 41 now. I'm seeing things in a different light. I wasn't 41 when JFK came into power. I wasn't 41 then. I don't have the same perspective of that. I'm reading to find out what past presidents are doing. But I live this, right? And I've been here for 3 years now on PFA talking about these things. And he's been gaslighting you this entire time, right? And I've been calling it out. I've been through so many debates left and right about the dog whistles and everything. And finally it boils over. And so now they're seeing that they're being treated differently because they're MAGA, quote unquote. I wonder how those Muslims felt. They're just coming home. They're Americans. They're just flying home. But they got to deal with, there's stories of like 9 hours of detainment at airports, all because Trump said we need a Muslim ban. I wonder how they felt. They didn't have anything to do with anything that happened anywhere. They just so happened to have a little melanin in their skin and then practice a religion. That's all they did. And from all of that, I don't think I heard from any of the Muslim ban stuff that they captured anybody relevant. That there was nothing relevant that happened. Nothing at all. Not one thing. We've seen synagogues, mosques, they've all been attacked and blown up. Like right here in Texas, not far down the road from my hometown, Victoria, Texas, we had one destroyed there, burned to the crisp. We've seen hate crimes against Jews increase. We've seen a lot of things that have gone on during this presidency to people who just choose to practice a different religion. You don't have to like it. I don't care if you don't like it. You can hate Islam all day long. You can hate Judaism all day long. That's up to you to be a hateful person. That's personal decisions. But when you act out that hate, then there's a problem. So now these people are starting to see what it feels like to have just a little bit of melanin and to be treated a little bit differently, or how it feels to wear a turban on your head and be treated a little differently. I mean, it's this isn't new. This isn't something new. It's been happening for 4 years. We've been dealing with it. And so the FBI is starting to crack down. I mean, they are. They're starting to crack down. Right now, what we're looking at is they are currently, as this says, they've opened up files on 170 people. This is on Axios for those of you that are listening to the audio. The FBI has opened files into 170 people and made charges in over 70 cases as it investigates the fatal siege on the Capitol. Acting U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin told reporters on Tuesday. Let me bump this up a little bit. They might be a little small on the video. See if this helps just a little bit. There we go. That's a little more legible. All right. So, the myriad of investigations facing the agency include felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy, assaults on local and federal officers, theft of mail, mentioned that this weekend, potential theft of national security information, absolutely, felony murder, and at least one civil rights excessive force investigation, Sherwin said. Here's the big picture. The briefing, one of the first by federal officials since the attack on the Capitol, comes after a prolonged information gap fueled fears among some members of Congress about the role of Capitol Police on the day of the siege. So, real quick break from that is that on the day of the siege, what we saw, and we now have video of Capitol Police. There was one Capitol policeman actually had a MAGA hat on. Right? Now, the question is, was he trying to fit in and not get attacked? Right? Or was he literally there as a MAGA supporter? Right? And so it's unsure. You know, they ended up coming in and helping escort out him and another gentleman who flashed a badge, helped some other Capitol Police out. So, and not saying that they saw him do anything wrong, not saying that at all. But the likelihood of some of these cops being MAGA supporters is there. Whether it's high or low, doesn't matter. There's a likelihood that they support Trump. There's a likelihood that they hate Trump, right? That's what the investigation is for, right? So they're looking into that. We've seen video of cops actually just telling them, come on in, opening up doors, just allowing them to ransack this place. Mind you, again, continuity of government is washed if they get in there and they supposedly had pipe bombs. If they get in there and they blow up Congress, I mean, House minority, House majority, Senate minority, Senate majority. The vice president, Trump was not far off the ground. I don't know if he left by the time the insurrection stuff started happening or not, but he was around the grounds at that time. The only one that I think was Pompeo, which I don't think he was there at the time. So, like they could have destroyed the government. Really, because remember, the government is nothing but people. So they could have destroyed the government. So they're investigating this at the highest level because these are high crimes. It just is. Like, I don't know what made them think. Like, this is, again, mob mentality. I don't know what made them think they could do this and then just fly home like nothing happened after recording themselves and posting it on social media. All right, so Sherwin called the range of crimes mind-blowing and stressed that cases would not be solved within weeks or months. Right? I mean, this is a we're going to be hearing about this for like the next 6 to 12 months, most likely. The Democratic committee chairs released a statement after the briefing that said they would demand full accountability, not only to hold those perpetrators responsible, but to send a strong signal that future seditious activity will not be tolerated. This is what they're saying. The head of the FBI's Washington field office, Stephen Dontuoni, I'm just going to take a stab at that, told reporters that the agency immediately shared intelligence gathered prior to the January 6th attack, that a number of individuals were planning to travel to the DC area with intentions to cause violence. Yes, but this is the yes, but section for those listening and not reading. An internal memo by the FBI office in Virginia, obtained by the Washington Post, appeared to contradict D'Antoni's prior insistence via a statement on Friday that there was no indication of planned attacks on the Capitol on January 6th. And this is where things start to get quite interesting because going forward, some heads are about to roll. The memo quotes calls for violence from an online thread. This is a quote. Be ready to fight. Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in, and blood from their BLM and Pantifa. I ain't heard Pantifa. Is that an offshoot of Antifa? Maybe it was a mistype. I don't know. Pantifa slave soldiers being spilled. Get violent. We get our president or we die. Nothing else will achieve this goal. This was in a memo. D'Antoni, I don't know how to say it. I'm stuck with making voices. Said the agency worked to determine whether people were practicing keyboard bravado or they actually have the intent to do harm as it gathered intelligence prior to January 6th. In this case, we had no indication the information was linked to any specific person, but this was a matter of an online discussion, which happens between specific people. Jesus. Adding that the information was immediately briefed to command post operations. D'Antoni did not directly address the memo obtained by the Post. The details: pipe bombs were found outside the RNC and DNC offices near hospital Capitol grounds on the day of the siege. Sherwin said, adding, they were real devices. They had explosive igniters. They had timers. Officials are not sure why the bombs did not go off. Prosecutors have formed several task forces to investigate attacks against the media, assault and battery on police officers, and to build seditious and conspiracy charges related to the most heinous acts. The U.S. Attorney's Office of the District of Columbia and its law enforcement partners noted reports of violence against members of the media while they were engaged in covering events unfolding at the Capitol. This is what to watch right here. Capitol Police told House Democrats on Monday they were preparing for at least 3 more potentially violent protests in Washington, D.C., with one involving a plot to assassinate lawmakers. Security has been heightened throughout D.C., and President Trump has approved an emergency declaration for the city ahead of the inauguration. It's a lot to read. But the details, they knew. They had every indication that there will be violence here. Or let's say, could be violence here. They had thousands of people showing up. Thousands. And they chose no credible threat. Not really sure. We can't link it to one person. Can't link it to a very specific person. So, just all of Congress is in there. Just all of Congress. It's okay. What? Of course heads are going to roll. There's no way around this. Heads are going to roll, and they should. I don't care if it was BLM, Antifa, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Heads have to roll. As we talked on Sunday, just imagine if terrorists decided there's a big rally. All of Congress is right there. 5 people just walk in there strapped, and they're just like, I'm just about to lay waste. It could have been a massive massacre. Massive. And they weren't prepared for it. I was watching one of the Michigan state representatives, and it's not like even though we had the particulars of what was potentially to happen here, it's not like we didn't have a precursor. Where in Michigan, they literally were going to kidnap the governor. Like, they arrested them. We knew they were going to kidnap the governor. You didn't think maybe there'll be some escalation from that? They also, in Michigan, were trying to get at state representatives. Other state representatives, I think the Secretary of State in Michigan, they had an assassination plot. What? What do you think these people are going to do? Like, seriously. What do you think? The same thing that they thought was going to happen if Trump won. That Antifa and BLM, which they love to lump together, which is hilarious, but Antifa and BLM would be storming the Capitol and trying to, destroy everything and do it. Like, they literally thought this was what was going to happen if Trump won. They said it for months. They said COVID was going to go away, and they said, watch what happens if Trump loses. The right is going to go right back to work the next day. Literal quote. They said the left is going to riot if they lose, and the right will just go back to work. We didn't get to see what the left did. It's very possible that they would have rioted. But now we've seen what the right did. So the FBI is actively going after them. Now, I'm not going to, I didn't pull up an article because I didn't want to read something about it. But I wanted to speak to Parler. I've been on Parler for, since it came out. I think it couldn't have been too long after it came out that I joined Parler. And I've been on there. I was on Gab as well. If you don't know Gab, it's the precursor to Parler. Gab ended up getting shut down, but I just wanted to kind of see what these free speech platforms are. And I'm a techie. Like, I love checking out tech, right? Like, I just enjoy it. So on Gab, I went on maybe 3 years ago, or maybe 4. Whenever Gab started, basically, I grabbed my username. I'm like, yeah, let's check it out. And the level of ignorance and vitriol that was on there was like, yeah, this isn't my kind of area. Like, it was completely ignorant. Stuff like, what has, Muslims or the Middle East ever provided for society? And my one comment on Gab was, do you mean like math? Like, math came from the Middle East? So, like, just like ignorance and vitriol, like, you give somebody anonymity and they get to do and say whatever they want to do. Whatever they want to do. They can just say anything because there's no retribution for it, right? You're not going to get banned. They're not going to, kick you off temporarily, put you in like Gab jail sort of thing. And it's just a vile place, right? Now, there are segments of Twitter that I just don't like. There's segments of Facebook that I don't like. And you can curate. So when I joined Parler, I joined it with that in mind. I joined it thinking this is conservative heaven, quote unquote, right? This is the place where they can come and they can just MAGA out, right? It's just all MAGA all the time, sort of thing. And I just figure they're going to hit the talking points, right? Like mainstream media is this, and Trump is the best ever, and like it's the left, and Antifa and BL. I just a bunch of rehash type stuff, right? But you could curate your timeline by just not following a bunch of people, right? So I would follow like Jason Stapleton when he finally joined. I enjoyed his because he was a little bit more loose on there. Um, but mainly I followed like a guy named Cocky Cat and Iron Man Duck, who's a good friend of mine, and it's just memes. They just would have these like meme nights. They would post memes for like 8 hours, right? And you may not like some of them because I mean, they post whatever they want to post about whatever topic. You may disagree with the meme, but I enjoyed that part. I really enjoyed that part of Parler, and I would go explore and look at what was going on, like what's trending. What are they talking about across the fence on Parler? Like what is the, you know, what is the thread of complaints right now? Because it was largely a bunch of that going on, and you know that was largely it. That was the extent of my use on Parler. Every now and then I troll a little bit, right? Like add a comment here just to kind of dig in some folks. Well, about a month or so ago, I started seeing a lot more, I guess it's hard to say, but they lean more left. You start reading some comments and it's like, oh, okay, here we go. It's turning into Twitter a little bit where you got the right saying something, the left's responding, and vice versa, sort of thing. But here's the bad. Parler, when you sign up, they would ask you for your information and you'd have to do some things to kind of verify who you are. Parler put all that stuff on a server sitting somewhere. And before they actually got banned from the hosting providers and whatnot, uh, yeah, that stuff was downloaded. Yeah. So I don't remember, it was maybe my driver's license or something that I had to upload. Somebody got that somewhere. They didn't have a great tech team. I found out that they were using like auto incrementing integers on their database, which is an issue that Twitter ran into. Basically, not to get too techy, but auto incrementing integers have a max of 2.1 billion on a primary key in a database table. And so once you hit that limit, the table's full. Like there's nothing else you can do. You can't add any more rows. It's full, right? So it caused a bunch of problems. And there, but it's when you're scaling, you make certain concessions, right? You don't necessarily know fully if you're going to hit this, but there's ways like seasoned database administrators would never do that, right? Because of the possibility, and refactoring later is harder. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Their response to that was, we didn't know that this was ever going to be a problem. And that was from the CTO. And so I bring that up only to say this, to clarify that their tech team didn't have the greatest abilities. Let's just say that. And because of that, it was basically one of those scenarios where it didn't surprise me when I heard that somebody was able to hack their Twilio integration, which Twilio was providing like text message verification to like verify your phone and stuff like that. They were providing that, and somebody hacked that and was able to get admin access, and that's how they were able to download everybody's information. Well, that information has been supplied to the FBI. So you can kind of see how we tie into the last segment. And yeah, I see Cooper in the chat. Yeah, it was a super MAGA propaganda machine, right? And so the points about being in there just like MAGA MAGA hoorah rah, cool, no big deal. Like do what you want. Like it's no issue. But anybody who was talking about storming the Capitol, they now have your information, and it could get thick pretty quick. So as it comes down to whether or not Parler should be kicked off in the way that they did. So I was talking to my friend. As I said, Iron Man Duck was on there. Great friend of mine, good guy. And he's a Trump supporter, but and I always say this, like you have to like put them in ranges, right? You have Trump supporters who are like the diehard, and that's the folks who were doing this Capitol stuff. But then you have those who vote for Trump because of party or because of one issue topics, right? And so like I kind of separate them. Iron Man's one of those that I separate because he's reasonable. And if something happens and it's wrong, he's going to call it out, right? So I was talking to him about this, and the problem with the Parler banning is this: my experience on Parler was not this negative vitriol, or vitriolic, sort of environment, because I just didn't have that list. I wasn't paying attention to that. So my experience of using Parler was fine. There was nothing wrong. I'd get a kick out of viewing the some of the ignorance and stuff that was going on and some of the cheerleading. I get a kick out of that stuff, but that wasn't where I was hanging out. But because Parler was used in relation to the insurrection, it got banned. So this is a larger problem with the whole free speech concept. Not free speech in and of itself, but free speech on using free speech on a platform using services that you don't own because you are beholden to them. If you are hosting on Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, shoot, it doesn't matter. WP Engine, Bluehost, I don't care where you are. If you're hosting on there and you are deemed vile for whatever reason, not just because you post dank memes, I mean because you were a part of an insurrection or take Milo Yiannopoulos a few years back. He was just like the dude came out and said that, not to rehash Milo, but came out and said that he thought the age of consent should be lowered to 12 so that it's okay for priests and boy to experiment with boys and stuff. Like what? Right? So he got quote unquote canceled, right? Even though he still existed, he was still on Parler. So you can say those things, but you have to understand that you're using someone else's services. It's like I had a I had a cousin who one time we were playing basketball. I don't know why, but that day, he just was on one, and he got to bumping gums and all this sort of stuff. And I just told him like, look, man, you're gonna need me before I need you. And so we walk outside after hooping, and he's like, "Hey, can I get a ride home?" I was like, "Oh no, player. Like, beat feet, kick rocks. Like, no, no, you're not gonna treat me like that, and then expect me to just give you a ride home. Nah, you got to walk." And mind you, we're in a small town. It wasn't that big of a deal for him to walk anyway. But the point is that when those things happen, you have to understand that you're using somebody else's services and they do not have to service you. I can tell you firsthand on Amazon Web Services, you can be kicked off for a lot of things. You can be banned from Amazon for many reasons. Sedition turns out to be one of them. So I get the outrage. I really do. I understand the point. I understand that it feels like they're being targeted because they are the conservative side of things. But you have to understand that this is not your server. You are literally using virtual machines on Amazon's hardware. So I almost titled this episode Whites Only Pies because I brought this up a while back. If you think every single business in the 1950s hated black people and did not want to service them, you'd be wrong because it just wasn't true. If every single person in America was 100% racist and hated black people, we would never, ever have seen any changes to slavery, Jim Crow, or any of these other things. We would never have seen it, right? Because the power structure was white, right? I mean, still is today, but less than it was then, and in a different, completely different fashion. But it was white. The white versus black thing comes from all of that, right? And if all the white people hated black people, we would never be free. And I wouldn't be talking to you right now, right? So in that vein, whites only pies, they were doing that because of their customers. What do you think would have happened if Jimmy's Corner Store started allowing black people to come sit at the counter? Like at a certain point, Jimmy, the owner of the corner store, could have been killed. And it happened quite a bit. Well, white people were lynched too because they were Negro lovers. Right? So if you think of it in that vein, business responds to the environment. If sedition was the way of life, then they would be fine. If that was okay and that was plausible, a plausible approach to American politics, that would be okay. They would have been fine, but it's not. So business responds to exactly what the temperature of their customers in general are. Or let's say not their customers, their shareholders, right? So they could have said no. They could have said no, Parler can stay. Apple did. Apple said, hey, Parler, you can stay, but you're going to have to fix your content issues. Parler said no. Apple said bye. I mean, you're using their services, right? You are on Apple's platform. You are putting, like, and Apple is notorious for messing with content restrictions and all this. I have no love for Apple's rules there. That's why I am Team Android. It's a bad advertisement for Android, but you get it. But that's why. But then even then, Google kicked Parler off. Same reasoning. Because you allow people to say and do anything without harm. Now, Parler did have some moderation, but they weren't moderating any of this, right? If they start moderating this, being the free speech platform, then they couldn't be the free speech platform because now they're moderating free speech. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place, right? There's a place for Parler and for people to go on and say all these things that they want to say without the violence and the vitriol. And they're going to have to find that space. And if they don't, then Parler's done. They're done. Oh, and by the way, because I'm on Android, Parler's not actually removed from my phone. And I can install it if I wanted to, if their server still worked, manually without the Play Store. Android for the win. That's a better commercial. All my Parler people, y'all switch to Android. If you don't want Apple all up in the music video, dancing and everything, okay, you may not get that reference, but a little Suge Knight there for you. So, Parler will either be okay or they won't. They're going to have to find that common ground. And if they don't, then they don't. But they have a massive scaling problem that's going to be hard to deal with without Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. There are a few others that are out there, but this, in terms of scale, worldwide scale, it's going to be difficult for Parler to do it without them. But you can. Amazon, Google, Facebook, all of these sites are running on physical hardware server machines somewhere. You can just have your own. It's just very costly. But if you want to use other people's services, you have to follow the rules. That's all it boils down to. All right, so last topic here is impeachment. Part deux. Part deux. I saw that in one of the I don't know, one of them spoof movies was called something Part Deux. And ever since I've seen that movie, I've thought about that, and that's just been hilarious to me. So my stance on, excuse me, hope that didn't come through the mic. My stance on impeachment from jump was simply this: ain't got the time. They just don't have the time to do this, right? They're starting to get Republican support, as we can see here. Liz Cheney says that she'll vote to impeach Trump, right? And so this is a common thing that you would kind of expect right now because they're politicians. On one hand, they're going to try to save face in a certain way. And then on another hand, they were in danger. They were literally in danger. So, of course, they're going to be hot about this. Of course, they can tell and they know what I've been saying, that Trump has been pushing these levers for 4 years, or pulling these levers. So Liz Cheney says the president of the United States summoned his mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I will vote to impeach the president. John Katko, to allow the president of the United States to incite his attack without consequence is a direct threat to the future of our democracy. For that reason, I cannot sit by without taking action. I will vote to impeach this president. Adam Kinzinger, Republican from Illinois. There is no doubt in my mind that the president broke his oath of office and incited this insurrection. I will vote in favor of impeachment. And the articles of impeachment are specifically stating that it was an insurrection against the U.S. government, inciting an insurrection, excuse me. I have no problem. I kind of expected it. I kind of expected they will go through this and they're going to try to do this. This brings, mind you, all three of those, Catco also, they're all Republicans. The main thing here is the timing. If they wanted to vote on articles of impeachment, they could have done it on Monday. But they gave this notice to Mike Pence, and they said, "Hey, I mean, you can either sign the 25th Amendment, or we're going to impeach him." Now, what they were doing was simple. Pardon me. What they were doing was simple. They were trying to push Pence to remove him because it's a longer process to remove him through impeachment. And they won't be able to do that before the 20th. That's a tall order. It really is a tall order to try to get Pence to say, yeah, let's impeach him. And let's call him incapable of doing his job, that he's incapacitated and can't do his job. That means Pence would make himself president for 10 days, 8 at this point. Like, who wants to be that? That would cement Pence's legacy in a way. And if the word is true, he's looking at a run in 2024. So why would he do this now? Right? He's only going to hurt himself politically, and he'll go down as a president of the United States for 8 days. Who wants that on their record? But more importantly, the 25th Amendment was intended to be when the president could not do his job. Not that you didn't think he was good for his job. So can he do a lot of, bad things between now and the 20th? Sure. He still has all the power of the president, right? So you may be trying to hedge against that, but the 25th doesn't really apply there. right? I'm no lawyer, but it doesn't really apply. He's not. It's not a situation where where he's basically, mentally incapable of it. I mean, you may argue that, but I mean, it's not really the case, right? Uh, so now they're trying for the impeachment. They gave Pence the 24 hours. That basically ends tonight, I believe. And so tomorrow they should be bringing up the articles of impeachment. That leaves Wednesday to do the vote, which they're still whipping these votes, where that basically means they're trying to get all their votes together. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They could potentially work on the weekend, but they've got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then they have the next week, so Monday through Friday, or I guess Monday through Wednesday almost, to get the impeachment done and have a trial in the Senate, which the Republicans can just call witnesses. They say, we want to investigate this. We want witnesses. They didn't want him whenever Trump was being impeached the first time. No witnesses. No witnesses at all. We want to just get this thing over and done with, right? But now, man, please. They'll call every witness they can. Jimmy Joe Bob that we saw on the video, can you come up here and tell us how you thought this thing was happening? Did you feel like Trump told you to? They could do whatever they want. They could. But Jimmy, Joe, and Bob, now one of them is going to get up there and blame Trump. And all they're going to do is waste time. So it'll never happen before the 20th. So will it happen after? Maybe. It's really interesting. There was somebody in one of the president's staff who was impeached years back. I don't even remember who it was. But they were impeached, and that was really the only time post office somebody has been impeached. The trial would basically prevent Trump from holding office again, and that's the target. That's what they're shooting for. Trump's about to have a hard time, man. Trump has basically burned bridges with everybody. This dude is losing one of his primary lenders in Deutsche Bank. He's losing like the support of like payment processors for the Trump campaign, which is Stripe, which by the way, I love Stripe, one of my favorite payment processors, especially as a developer. He's losing all of these avenues, all of these connections. It's going to be very difficult for him to run and raise money again. It just is. Not impossible, but it just is. We've seen him raise $300 million to stop the vote. A vote that none of that money really went to help. So I don't hold anything out of the realm of possibility, but this dude has painted himself a leper. And all he had to do, as Chris said, all he had to do was sit down and shut up, and he would have probably done 8 full years. But he just couldn't do it. We're the Political Free Agents. You can catch us Sunday, 2 p.m. And I was about to say Friday. Why do I always get these dates wrong? I just need to record an outro. That's what I need to do. I need to record an outro and an intro. Because I either get the intro right and I flub the outro, or vice versa. Anyway, we're PFA. You can catch us on Sunday, 2 p.m., Tuesday at 7 p.m. Find us at politicalfreeagents.com. That's where you can get to all of our social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You'll find the links that I went through tonight on social media in a little while. You can find us at PFA Podcast on each one of those. And make sure you go to YouTube, hit the like, and subscribe somewhere down here at the bottom, and share the show. That's it. I'm asking you to do something for free. It don't even cost. It doesn't cost. You ain't got to do anything. Hit the button. Share it out. Share it to some other people. Jump in the chat. Appreciate you, Cooper, for joining us in the chat today. We'll catch you on the flip side. We're PFA.